And that has, of course, had an intelligence component, and, a military component, a diplomatic component, and more.
The US Congress would allocate the CIA billions each year, but its entire budget never publicly disclosed. During its early years, the agency's main focus was on battling communism, spying on the Soviets, carrying out armed operations in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Indonesia, helping overthrow Iran's government in 1953. The CIA was particularly busy in Latin America too, backing coups or rebel groups in Chile, Brazil, Peru, Guatemala, Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, and Uruguay.
The United States government and the United States intelligence agencies do a lot of things abroad. They have, like a lot of other countries, been involved in covert matters, in matters involving sort of pursuing America's objectives in countries from Iran to Nicaragua, from Mexico to Russia. All of these countries the United States has been involved in.
Though many of these operations were commissioned by the White House, the CIA was scorned by the US press, public, and politicians. President John F. Kennedy reportedly said he wanted to splinter the CIA in 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds, while his predecessor gave this stark warning about powerful, shadowy groups.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
The National Security Agency was created in 1952 to gather intelligence within the United States. The much older Federal Bureau of Investigation also pushed, and some say overstepped, the boundaries of acceptable behaviour, spying on protest groups and political parties, attempting to infiltrate newsrooms, and infamously threatening civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.
These agencies were supposed to exist only in times of national emergency, or at least function and grow only in times of national emergency when there was an actual enemy that they were fighting, and instead they've just kind of become these permanent appendages of the US government that inexorably grow in their power and authority, and nobody can control or stop them.
Details of the overall United States intelligence budget are classified. Estimates range from $50 to $80 billion a year. Congressional oversight groups, including the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, are tasked with keeping these agencies in check, though they aren't always given operational details.
In the wake of Watergate and a lot of the overstepping that was done by U.S. intelligence agencies at home, the U.S. Congress has taken a pretty advanced role in trying to oversee how our intelligence communities are run and managed.
But that oversight is too weak for critics, who claim these agencies make up a shadow, unelected government, a deep state.
There's a faction in Washington that is immune to elections and that exercises enormous amounts of power and doesn't come and go depending upon any vote, but stays for years and even decades. They're the Pentagon, the intelligence community, led by the CIA, law enforcement agencies like the FBI.
70 million people lost their lives in the Second World War. Nations were redrawn. Millions were displaced. It was a fragile peace in a fractured world. The creation of the CIA and other US intelligence agencies was meant to maintain order and prevent more mass death. But at what cost? How powerful have these agencies become? And are they under control?
The nature of our intelligence community is such that you have the leadership of CIA and FBI and NSA and other organizations that have been there for 20 and 30 and 35 years. They know that presidents come and go every 4 years or every 8 years, but they're going to be there for decades. And that's what we should be worried about.
Finding out exactly what these US intelligence agencies, or deep state, are currently doing isn't easy. Their operations are carried out in secret. Scant details are provided to very few politicians. Their stated purpose is to collect, analyse and evaluate intelligence and pass that information on to the US President and policymakers. According to critics, they do much more than that. They claim agents in the field lie, cheat, steal, torture and kill. They interfere with elections, infiltrate governments and spy on the public under the guise of protecting citizens and the national interest. We know this thanks to whistleblowers. Former spies who were so disturbed by what they witnessed, they sacrificed their freedoms to expose the illegal behaviour of the deep state. 2 whistleblowers spoke with Sky News about their experiences and the deep state's current operations. Tonight, they help us peer behind the top secret curtain.
I would end up having to defend the Constitution against my own government in secret.
Thomas Drake never meant to rock the boat, and the Air Force veteran never thought he'd ever be considered a traitor. He joined the National Security Agency to help protect his country. His first day, September 11, 2001.
The day frozen forever in my mind, as it is for a number of us.
We have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
There it is. Oh. There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
In that moment, I knew that we were under attack. I even said that as I stood up, and everything had changed in an instant.
Drake claims US intelligence agencies used the terror attacks to dramatically increase their own powers. And while working in the NSA, he discovered President George W. Bush had ordered the agency to spy on American citizens in an unprecedented and unconstitutional mass surveillance program dubbed Operation Stellar Wind.
We were in total violation of the Constitution, but it's like the Constitution didn't matter. Set it aside. It's in the way of national security. And we don't need it anymore.
Our second whistleblower is a former spy. John Kiriakou travelled the world during his 14 years as a CIA agent. He too saw a startling shift in the way US agencies acted after 9/11. As CIA's chief of counter-terror operations in Pakistan in 2002, he was offered to be trained to torture prisoners.
I was never a believer in violating international law or the laws of human rights, and we're signatories to the United Nations Convention Against Torture. Torture is a violation of US law as well, and I simply wasn't willing to do it.
After raising his concerns with his superiors to little effect, he went to the press.
Did you feel comfortable with the techniques?
Frankly, no.
Kiriakou would be arrested for exposing the illegal torture program. He spent nearly 2 years behind bars and claims no one was punished for the torture program itself.
I had never felt so alone in my entire life. I was blessed at the time with a wife who was incredibly supportive. That changed later, but she was supportive at the time. And she told me, you have to fight this and you have to embrace it. She said, they have consistently underestimated your strength and you have to fight them because you've done nothing wrong.
According to Kiriakou, Drake and other whistleblowers, there are 3 main focuses in the deep state's playbook: surveillance, foreign influence and domestic control. Operation Stellar Wind, which Thomas Drake exposed, is but one NSA mass surveillance program. Fellow former NSA worker Edward Snowden revealed several US telephone and internet companies have been providing the NSA with virtually all of its customers' records. The so-called PRISM program gives the NSA easy access to Google, Facebook, Microsoft and Apple servers.
Essentially entailed a device that was put into the data centers of every major internet company, and this box allowed analysts at the CIA and NSA to essentially track any user that they wanted to.
Leaked documents revealed the X-Key Score program, which allows the NSA to search nearly everything a user does on the internet through data it intercepts across the world.
That's all NSA does practically, is spy on Americans. They intercept literally every phone call, every text message, every email from every American in the country. And they have enough computer storage space at two massive facilities, one in the state of Utah, one in the state of Maryland, to save every one of those documents and its metadata, or calls and its metadata, for the next 500 years.
Drake claims Australians should be concerned, as our intelligence agencies work hand in hand with their American counterparts under the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Agreement.
History's not kind when it comes to the erosion of rights and freedoms and liberties. I mean, these are extraordinarily precious, and any attempt to take them away, it's very hard to get them back. You don't have to go back too far in the 20th century to know what the dark history is when that occurs.
The deep state is believed to be engaged in many other morally questionable activities abroad. According to the Washington Post, the CIA funded rebel groups in Syria. US agencies directly fund pro-Western political groups around the world, and military analysts claim CIA fingerprints are all over opposition movements in Venezuela and Iran.
Intelligence services of the United States have acted around the world, both probably in terms of forcing political outcomes. All countries seek to do this. Russia seeks to do it in this country. America is probably doing it in Venezuela as well. Whether it's good or bad depends upon where you sit politically.
The deep state, our whistleblowers argue, is also intent on controlling politics at home.
I think the deep state aims really are to maintain the status quo. And if you're not going to maintain the status quo, if that's going to change at all, that it should change in the direction of more power for the deep state.
News media is arguably the most effective platform to promote this. Intelligence bosses, who critics claim openly lied to the public.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Are then being touted as trustworthy TV pundits after leaving office.
He just cannot get his head around the fact of the Russian meddling, when the evidence for which was just overwhelming.
Now you have these news outlets essentially merging with these agencies. You can't watch MSNBC or CNN without every 5 minutes seeing multiple operatives from these agencies informing the public or purporting to inform the public about the news. And it's obviously incredibly disturbing, because these are agencies that specialize in misinformation, disinformation, propaganda.
The Freedom of the Press Association claims intelligence agencies have also gone to great lengths to censor critical stories.
On many, many occasions, intelligence agencies have threatened newspapers, have claimed that they will have blood on their hands, have used various methods to try to get them from publishing newsworthy and important information that the public should know.
The deep state's sway on social media is strengthening too.
The relationship that intelligence agencies have to these internet platforms that we use every day has changed. Whereas before a lot of it was focused on surveillance and things like that, it is actually now much more about shaping content online or restricting content online. The end result of this has been to integrate even more closely these internet giants into this kind of national security establishment.
This may be the tip of the iceberg. Despite the brave efforts of whistleblowers, we likely won't ever know the extent of the deep state's nefarious actions. Its supporters claim intelligence agencies' activities are vitally important, that they're preventing attacks and saving lives. Though do the ends justify the means?
Secrecy breeds arrogance. Secrecy breeds a lot of behaviors that normally would be held accountable in an open, an open and transparent environment. And that's what makes this even more dangerous, is when you have agencies who believe they can hide themselves behind the blanket and the convenience of national security.
Donald Trump believes the deep state is trying to take him down. The US president claims those within the agencies which are supposed to work for him are working against him. In tweets and speeches, he's blamed the deep state for the Russia probe, media leaks, the multiple wars the US is involved in, and the current impeachment push. Trump is credited with the resurgence of the idea of the deep state. But does this conspiracy theory have any basis in fact? Is the deep state actually undermining the leader of the free world?
Deep state radicals and their fake news allies.
There is an establishment, both in foreign policy and also in the intelligence community. And in the intelligence community, it truly is the deep state.
The deep state theory, I've never really bought into, but there's a lot of people out there that are taking their agenda and running wild with it.
Deep state sits alongside fake news as the catchphrases of the Trump presidency, oft repeated by the president and his backers.
Proof the deep state is real in America and that you, the American people, see what is really going on.
It's about a deep state trying to drag a crook across the presidential finish line and trying to destroy the man Americans wanted in the Oval Office.
There are other Republican senators up here whose allegiance is more to the deep state than it is to the president.
Trump's definition of deep state goes beyond the intelligence agencies. He includes those in any government departments who are secretly working against him, either appointed by the previous administration or just opposed to his agenda.
Unelected deep state operatives who defy the voters to push their own secret agendas are truly a threat to democracy itself.
And he may have cause to be concerned. There have been more leaks from the Trump White House than any other administration, and an exodus of senior officials.
Government tends to be resistant to political change because government has its own opinions, and those working in governments have their own opinions. And so this idea of a deep state sort of confuses what is natural bureaucratic resistance.
But the alleged deep state attacks began well before Trump took the oath of office. The FBI spied on members of the Trump campaign, an apparently unprecedented measure.
They got wiretaps on former campaign officials. They ran informants on former campaign officials. And they also worked, it wasn't just the FBI also worked with the CIA. Former CIA Director John Brennan has personally taken credit for helping to generate the Russia investigation and for supplying it with information. So their intrusion into domestic politics was unprecedented, and we're still waiting for accountability.
The main battle between Trump and the deep state has been centered on a Russia conspiracy theory. Its followers believe Donald Trump is a Manchurian candidate, a puppet of President Putin.
The entire thing has been a witch hunt.
With disputable evidence of a tenuous Trump-Russia connection, the FBI launched an inquiry. And for more than 2 years, US mainstream media breathlessly spruiked Trump's downfall.
Breaking news.
A bombshell.
Another bombshell out of the White House.
Breaking news, a new bombshell.
Today was a turning point.
A turning point. We're at a turning point here.
I believe this is the beginning of the end.
I do too.
It's really the beginning of the end.
He may be feeling the walls closing in on him.
All the walls closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
One astrologer says this means the beginning of the end for President Donald Trump.
Dozens of lawyers and FBI agents spent 23 months and $32 million investigating. The FBI laid 199 charges against 37 people and companies. But, crucially, found no evidence of Americans colluding with Russia. A victory, Trump claimed, against an attempted deep state coup.
Is that deep state or what? Explain it. It's the most incredible thing people have ever seen, what's going on, but we're going to straighten it out.
Now Democrats are attempting to impeach President Trump, claiming he acted inappropriately by suggesting to the Ukrainian president that he investigate Joe Biden and his son's questionable behaviour in Ukraine. Details of the now notorious Trump-Zelensky phone call were leaked by a CIA agent temporarily working in the White House.
The Democrats, the media, and the deep state are desperate to stop us. They want to stop us because they know we are here, and that's what we're doing, and that's what's taken up so much time. We're draining the swamp in Washington.
Trump's political opponents have even suggested the deep state will come after him.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
Such a controversial figure promoting such contentious policies is bound to inspire some resistance within government agencies, especially when this president campaigned on ending overseas interference and challenged intelligence agencies' actions.
The intelligence agencies have run amok. They've run amok.
John Gans has worked in the Pentagon, Treasury, for the House Speaker and Senator Hillary Clinton. He denies cabals of officials are undermining the White House.
There is no organized deep state in Washington, right? I think that's the first and critical thing that needs to be remembered. As much as we would like to sort of believe the conspiracies, as much as we'd like to believe these sorts of things, the very nature of American government is just like governments all over the world. It's a bureaucracy, right? And bureaucracies don't always like to be led. They don't always like to listen to elected or sort of political leaders. That happens in Australia, that happens in America, that happens in Russia, that happens in Iran. This is the nature of establishing a government.
The definition, power, effectiveness, and even existence of the deep state is debated, though as our whistleblowers have said, the CIA, NSA, and FBI still command remarkable resources, have a record of overstepping legal and ethical bounds, and there's little accountability.
So the loyalty of the national security state is what I prefer to call it, ends up running far deeper than the loyalty to the very country that they're bound to serve.
Ultimately, it's the American public which should decide whether these agencies should be as powerful as they are, whether it's right for them to have blanket powers to spy on private citizens, whether they should be allowed to kill, fund rebels, and undermine foreign governments as freely and frequently as they do, because the deep state won't surrender power willingly.
It does raise some really hard questions about how does a democracy survive